Hello, welcome to Lab Results. I am Marty Monaghan, Executive Director for the Black Man Lab. And tonight we are going to have a great conversation with a brother who is doing and has done some amazing things through some tough times. And we'll get into that a little bit deeper as we get into the conversation. But before that, first and foremost, I just want to tell you where the Black Man Lab originates. We started about 4 years ago. Brother Mowley Davis and 3 other brothers got together to have some conversations with their sons, because we know quite often as fathers, our sons can tune us out. Sometimes they might listen to an uncle or listen to a godfather, a close friend, more so than they'll listen to us. And so that's how it was the impetus for starting the Black Man Lab. Well, what happened was those young men wound up bringing their friends into the space, and each week they would talk about different topic matter, whether that's becoming a physician, whether that's being a basketball player, whether that's being an entertainer, whether that's whatever. We would bring in professionals to in whatever those fields were, to have conversations with them. And then they got to play basketball afterwards too. So that was the carrot that was hanging there. Well, that's how it started. And then it grew to us having over 250 Black men in the room every week to have different discussions around different topic matter, whether that was professional development or self-development, because we know that it's just not about us being our best professional selves. It's also about us being our best personal self as well. So again, that grew to 250 people, men on a weekly basis, and you just don't see that quite often. And we would have anywhere from ages 5 years old all the way to 85 years old. So an intergenerational conversation with Black men. And we're continuing that today. During the pandemic, we started doing this virtually because we couldn't meet in person at the Andrew and Walter Young YMC where we normally meet. And so we started having this done virtually, and we were able to pull in people from around the country into this space, as we call it, a safe and sacred space for Black men. But then we went back live again. So we're back now on Mondays at the Andrew and Walter Young YMCA here in Atlanta. We're meeting again in person, which is awesome. But we didn't want to lose out on the opportunity to talk to brothers from around the country and do this. So this is why we have now lab results. So we have the Black Man Lab on Monday, lab results on Wednesday, where we're able to have more of a one-on-one conversation with different brothers to talk about what got them to where they are today. So results on what they've been doing to get to where they are today. So first and foremost, what I want to do is, we always talk about we have to make sure that those that came before us are in this space, that they're here to have this conversation with us. Those folks that we know would be really, really pleased with us doing this work that we do. This past weekend, actually from Thursday on through the weekend, we had a really significant and powerful movement that we were part of, and the Black Man Lab helped to sponsor. And that was the March for Justice around Brother Julian Lewis, who was, no other way to say it, murdered by a Georgia State trooper in Savannah, Georgia, down in South Georgia. We'll talk about that more in depth, but the leader of this March for Justice was his son, and that's Brook Bacon, who we have here with us tonight. I felt really moved to make sure that we brought him on this week, just because I wanted him to be able to tell the story, and then just to find out a little bit more about him and what he thought of the movement that we had this past weekend. So with that, we always call on ancestors, and the ancestor I think that we're going to make sure that we call on is his dad tonight. So Brother Brook, if you come off of mute and come on camera, I'd like for you just to join me in calling on your father's name today, and then just following that with an ashe. That's what we do every week. Every week we call on the ancestor. But again, I think tonight is significant. So if you could with me on three. 1, 2, 3. Julian Lewis. Ashe.
Ashe.
So we're bringing him into this space with us tonight because I know 100% he'll be proud of the work that you did on that 5-day walk that we had. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Brook on and let him introduce himself, and I'll give a little bit ahead of time. Again, he's the son of Julian Lewis, one of, unfortunately, of many, especially here in the state of Georgia, that has died at the hands of the police unrightfully. With that, Brother Brook, can you come on and give a quick intro of yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you grew up and things of that nature.
Certainly. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. It's great to be here with you, Brother Marty, and I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be here to have this conversation and to speak to those who may be watching and listening. I am the son of Julian Lewis. I grew up in many places. I was born the same location my father was born, right there in Sylvania. Lived there for some time with aunts and uncles and cousins and grandmothers and grandfathers and my father, and had all that support around me. As I grew older, more opportunity was found in more populated areas. So we ended up moving to Savannah sometime after that. I was rather young, about 6 years old or so. And there was just an abundance of opportunity at the time for my mother in particular, as being young parents, that became the primary focus was for that next generation. So that is kind of how things progressed, was just to find better opportunities for me to grow and to thrive. My mother was very careful and my father was very careful of making sure that those opportunities were made available to me. And so that's kind of what spurred what then through my childhood and up through my, pubescent years and so forth, leading me to move from Savannah to Memphis, and lived in Pennsylvania for a period of time, lived in Rhode Island, lived in Massachusetts, and now I live in New Hampshire. And that was just a progression of really opportunities that were provided for the family. Throughout my life, the economy has changed, and with that, opportunities become available at different places and different, size metropolitan areas. And so that's kind of what spurred that movement. A lot of people hear that and they first thing they usually assume is that there was some type of military family. Those children often experience that type of, transition throughout their life as they're growing up, as parents move from base to base and location to location, sometimes country to country. But in my case, it was just simply to find a better place for, more opportunity for my mother to be able to provide, as she was my primary caregiver, particularly after we left Georgia. And that just kind of led to the Northeast. And so that was kind of the progression. And granted that I had graduated high school in this area, that's where I started to look for college in some of the area. And college didn't come right away for me. It took a little bit of time to get there, but it was something that I saw as essential. My mother and father both, kind of emphasized the importance of that higher education. And I heard it. I heard that calling, and I took to it. And so that is kind of what solidified me in this area after graduating and then having a family of my own. And so that's kind of stabilized me at this point.
Gotcha. So now you're in what part of New Hampshire are you in?
It's southern New Hampshire. If you're looking at a map, it's right there on the border, north of Massachusetts. So if you go about 45 minutes north of Boston, that's where you can kind of find where I am.
Okay. I'm asking because I'm kind of familiar, used to work up that way. So all the way up the New England coast there. So um, very different than than South Georgia, right?
Yes, there is quite a contrast.
Yeah.
Some would even go as far as say there could be a bit of culture shock even, transplanting from one location to the other. But there are, a lot of commonalities. A lot of people face the same challenges here as they face there, particularly when it comes to opportunities for people of our community. There are just a lot of barriers and hurdles that stand in our way that exist sometimes a little bit more subvertly than overtly, but they are certainly there.
Sure. Sure. Now, what school did you go to again? What college?
I went to Brandeis University.
Okay, Brandeis. Very good. I don't know how I missed that in our time together. So now you're married. How many kids?
Two children.
Two.
Yep.
What are your kids' age?
They're 8 and 5. Yeah.
Great.
And I'm trying my best. Hopefully they're going to be good, but you might be able to stop around upstairs. They're above me right now. So
That's all right. That's all right. If they come on camera, we'll pull them in. No problem. No problem. So let's talk about, a year ago, a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
You get this horrific news, right? How was that presented to you? What did you hear initially? What was the start of this journey?
Initially, it came in the middle of the night. A call that I didn't actually receive right away because I was fast asleep. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I didn't hear that call right away. My phone was on vibrate, and I was fast asleep. And so when I woke up to the voicemails from my aunt and then my mother, I knew something was gravely wrong. It wasn't something I could detect right away. I think my aunt may have been trying to keep me from being too alarmed. She did, have an urgency behind it. But then once I got a second call, then I knew it was grave. It wasn't an injury. It wasn't, something of that nature. But we had lost someone. I could feel it immediately. Knowing that, we have some elders in our family. It was possible that that's where, we were experiencing our loss. But upon news, it was heartbreaking. It was infuriating. So a lot of that all kind of came to a head. And you start kind of thinking of all the injustices that have occurred, and now it's struck, right at the heart. That took me a little while to deal with. The amount of emotions that kind of bubble up at that time can be, they can blind your senses. I mean, literally, I couldn't hear for a little while. You get this, your blood begins to move at such a rate that all you can hear is that rushing through your temples. And so I did recognize that, and having young children, and my wife, and not wanting them to, kind of be negatively impacted by how I felt, I kind of secluded myself. I isolated slightly just so I could begin to process the information that was given to me, and then began to open up to those closest to me, and that was the first step in beginning to heal. Is just being able to talk about it, just being able to accept that information, begin to converse about it, and find out what had happened. Up until that point, the facts that I knew, that he was killed and murdered that was already too much to bear. That was all that I could process at that time. But once I was able to kind of come down from that level of enragement and anger, sorrow, and so there are heights and depths to that that mingle to kind of create that state. Once I was able to kind of come down from that state, that was the first step in talking to family to be able to begin processing.
Yeah, I can imagine, as a Black man in America, first of all, when you hear of all the levels of injustice that occur, particularly to us as Black men, there's this underlying rage that you have when you hear it. But now, when it hits home, I can't imagine, the level of internal rage that you probably were carrying during that moment, because you're seeing it all the time, like the George Floyds and the Ahmaud Arbery's and Rayshard Brooks. You're seeing all these things happen, and then next thing you know, boom, it's right in your lap.
Yes.
Especially when for all practical purposes, it's nonsensical, even more so in that there was no crime being committed, no egregious crime being committed. So I can imagine the level of pain and anger that was there. And when you first found out, Brooke, was it presented to you that there was a possibility of some injustice being done to your father in the picture, or was it just a state trooper killed your dad?
Initially, that information wasn't available.
Right.
There was more or less a coroner's report. There was a death, and this is how it occurred. And so that's all we really had at the time. But given the circumstances that we've seen, on too many occasions throughout, the country, the likelihood at that moment that I believed, there wasn't injustice in this case was next to none. That, we've seen, like you said, through so many of these video, files that spilled across the internet, and broadcast over the news programs and everything like that. There hasn't been that I can recall a voice speaking to the other side. There is support for the other side, where they will stand fast behind support for law enforcement blindly. But the outrage that comes from this is often on the side. It has always been on the side of justice. It always has been for those victims because of the manner in which they died. And that has gone unopposed. There has been no worldwide, protest and uprising to say that the knee applied to George Floyd's neck was reasonable or warranted.
Right.
Everybody can see, and how he couldn't understand that is mind-blowing. But there are so many options available to law enforcement in these scenarios that wouldn't lead to fatalities. it wouldn't lead to harm. But we haven't seen the other side of that, which is telling, I think.
Right. And it's interesting you say that. The piece that you said there, right there at the end, is the fact, right? We as a people haven't seen that, right? We don't hear. Somebody said the other day, we don't see other communities having to march for these reasons, right? We don't see them having to, post protests. We took over the streets of Savannah this past weekend strictly to make Savannah uncomfortable, to feel the level of, not even feel the level, but to just make them uncomfortable. Is nowhere near the level of discomfort that you and your family have had to deal with the death of your father. And we just wanted to symbolize that. We want to make you all see that this is flat out wrong, and it's only happening to our communities, right? I think that it's important that what we want to do here tonight too is also, because there may be people that are listening in that don't necessarily know the full story of what happened. And either you want to give the story, or I can do whatever you want to do.
Well, my father was in his vehicle. It was in the evening, summertime, August 7th, and a trooper engaged him. Jake Gordon Thompson engaged him over a broken tail light. This area is very rural. If you had a chance to see some of the live footage that may have been streaming or posted, there are cotton fields around. There are backwoods around. You pass dirt roads on a regular basis, roads that are impassable with a moderate amount of rain in some cases.
The road your father passed on was that road. I mean, and I'm sorry to cut you off. When I went out there, we were there a year ago. And when I went to that site of the murder, before I knew a little bit of the story, I knew what happened. And you know how in our mind, we always have, well, what happened? How could this have been misconstrued? Maybe, whatever, you're trying to be somewhat, logical in the thought process. When we got to that site and I saw where it was and knew what time, like you said, in the evening, and you saw that this was a clay dirt road, red dirt road, in between two pastures that there's really you come in one way and you leave one way, right? When I saw that, I literally said to my lady who was with me, I said, this was a murder. As soon as I saw it, that's all it could be, is that there will be no reason to have this kind of an interaction on that little road. Number one, he couldn't be speeding on it. Number two, if he wanted to, all he had to do was call ahead and say, have a cop at the other end that will block the road, right? There's no reason for it. So for sure, no reason to do a pit maneuver. And I'm sorry, go ahead, continue. It infuriates. I know it infuriates you, brother, but
yes,
having been through this, seen it from a year ago to today, it's really infuriating. But go ahead.
And just that, with pastors on both sides, there is no light. The only light you have is by the light of the moon. And I couldn't tell you if there was a moon out that night. If there was no moon out, the darkness is frightening, because there is nothing. If anything is to happen to you in these types of environments, there is no one there.
No one to hear you.
No one around. If he had, run a flat tire, no one would be there. at all. And it will be miles and miles and miles to reach someone.
Yeah.
And that brings about, he probably did not feel safe stopping. And so he didn't stop. He put on his flashers. He used hand signals to indicate the direction that he would be traveling in at intersections, as he was on this dirt road and crossing a paved road onto another dirt road, onto Stony Brook Pond, where he was murdered. He stopped. He stopped at stop signs before crossing these roads. So his threat or level of danger to the public was non-existent. He wasn't speeding. He was carrying about at a rate no more than I think 40 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there was no danger posed by him operating his vehicle down this road. However, there was no sense of safety as well. That is something that, you know, we have kind of experienced, and I don't know if vicariously is the right word, but that has been that in light, that can be an issue. You can be in broad daylight and not be safe. So never mind on a country dirt road. And so that led him to continue to try and find a location where he would be safe, that was well lit, where there might be witnesses, in order to, you know, make sure that the troopers' actions were in check and just. The trooper decided to further engage my father and perform a pit maneuver, which is something that they use in extreme cases to protect the public safety. And they use that in order to kind of nudge the car in front of them, forcing them to spin and gain control of a situation. After doing so, my father's car did spin 180 degrees, facing the trooper, landing in a ditch, disabling the car. The battery was then jostled and disconnected from the vehicle, and so it was no longer operable. And he then got out of his vehicle, put his car in park, put the brake on, exit the vehicle, and within 1.6 seconds, shot and killed my father. He was shot right about here, right about there, right in the head. And then he, you know, he continues to give commands to my father, who had just been murdered, as if he could react in any fashion. Impossible. He then apparently, you know, made some phone calls of a personal nature before calling for EMS for my father. And that is egregious in either fashion, whether he was not concerned for my father's life, or he knew he was dead. So those are the events that occurred on that evening. Since there's been, you know, a period of time where he was held without bond, as GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, conducted an investigation and found a mountain of evidence pointing to the fact that this was murder, so much so that they actually had him arrested, or sought to have him arrested, at which point they had to seek the authorization on a warrant from a Superior Court judge who signed a warrant, which led to his arrest, and then bound the case over to be heard as murder. And by that, I mean, many of you may know or not, but there are degrees to which someone can be charged, and that binding over could have happened to a lesser degree. He could have been found, or the investigation could have, indicated murder, and then it could have been bound over as a lesser degree as third degree or second degree or negligible homicide or manslaughter or something else of a lesser degree. But it was held up as murder and bound over as so to be heard as a murder case. He was held without bond for a little over 100 days and then released with no additional evidence pointing to any other conclusion outside of the fact that he had murdered my father. Shortly thereafter, he was then hired by the fire department. So he is still in public service. And that's kind of where we stand now. We received a no bill when the grand jury heard the case, which more or less set him free. We do have an opportunity to represent this case, but that is something that needs to be approached very carefully, as there are only two opportunities. You can present the case, and if it comes back in the fashion that it did with a no bill, no indictment, then you have an additional opportunity to represent the case. But in the event that a grand jury has the same findings, then there is no more action that can be taken with regards to the murder of my father.
And let's circle back a little bit to the grand jury so that everybody understands this went before the grand jury after, again, the GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigations, had deemed this was murder.
Yes.
Went before the grand jury, and the grand jury didn't indict because what?
Their goal, not their goal, but what they are charged with in that time frame is to find if there is probable cause that this is murder. Not beyond a reasonable doubt, but just probable cause, which has been explained to me as the lowest bar by which something can be proved. So given all of the evidence that was presented to them, all the evidence that the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, found and is relied upon on every other case as an authorized body institution to conduct these investigations and provide facts by which the jury can rely upon, they did not agree with any of that evidence, not the timing of the shooting, in the sense from the point that he got out of the car to when he fired the shot, the fact that he used a pit maneuver, there were some discrepancies in his statements from the point that he was interviewed initially afterwards, and then furthermore or further out when he was making statements for the court. None of this led them to believe that there was any shred of evidence that could potentially lead to the conclusion that there was a murder. And that is ultimately where the injustice is served. That the community by which this is handed over, which is supposed to be a check on law enforcement to say, well, this officer said that this crime was committed. We will then take that and present it to the community, and they then will decide, was that officer right? Was that truthful? In order to make sure that they, aren't allowed to abuse their power and just put anyone in jail that they feel. In this case, they didn't put someone in jail, they put someone in a grave. So there is only one side to the story now, honestly, which is, right. Kind of what he presents. There are the facts but the story can only be told from one side.
Sure.
So they did not find that any of the evidence that the investigation had produced was sufficient enough to find probable cause for murder.
Now, there's a video, right?
Yes, there is.
And were they able to see the video?
Yes, they were presented with video evidence. They were presented with photographic evidence. They were presented with the statements produced by the various agents involved in the investigation and other witnesses as well who arrived afterwards on the scene of the crime. And so all of this is presented to them. Audio, video, pictures, statement, written word. And they had, witness testimonies. They had individuals from the GBI come forward to state, what they believe occurred, which they concluded was murder. And with all of that, and the judge, the superior judge, signing a warrant for the arrest of an active officer at the time.
I'm sorry to cut you off again, bro, but just so those listening understand, this doesn't happen, right?
That's right.
This is not normal where the GBI or any investigative government agency, state government agency, for the most part, it's very, 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 very hard for them to charge a police officer with murder. I shouldn't say charge, but say that it's murder that the police officer committed. We just don't see that happening. And for that to have happened here in Georgia has to tell you that it was very egregious what occurred, right? So, where we're at right now with this is where?
Currently, we have to carefully consider the timing as to which we want to represent the case. There is no statute of limitation, fortunately, on this, and so we can take the time needed to review the evidence and think about when we want to have this re-seen by a jury, a grand jury, that is. The march led into Savannah to the U.S. Attorney Southern District. We were received by them. We were able to voice the concerns regarding this case as well as for the community at large. And those were not sugar-coated at all. We were straightforward with those words and the concerns and the grief and the pain and the anguish, the enraged spirits and souls of all those that we have lost and those who have been left behind were laid before them. It went somewhat into the local press where they were able to report that there is an investigation. But that is all that we know at this point. That which we are hoping for is that this will shed light onto the fabric of that community, of the community. We found, over time that this is something that is kind of, like I said, blindly supported. And law enforcement can do no wrong, which is a fallacy. That's a farce. That's not true. And they can do wrong just as anyone else could do wrong. There have been plenty of mistakes that have been made by law enforcement. And it's up to them to change their tactics and find ways to treat everyone equitably. That we haven't received. we haven't received equity in this. These police shootings are not occurring, as you stated, to other communities. This is happening to our community.
Yeah, yeah. As it relates to the video,
yes.
Do you think? I know that one of the things that we're pushing forward on is releasing of the video. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts around why it hasn't been released?
Initially, I'm not sure why it wasn't released. I assume that it was due to the fact that, it was an active investigation, maybe, and there was some limitations as to what could be released to the public. At this point, I don't understand why it couldn't be released to the public. It couldn't be of any detriment, I think, in my belief, to the understanding of what happened. It's already been presented to the members of that community, and they did not find that it was sufficient enough to move forward with a case for murder. That, I think, needs to be tested at a larger sample size. Just sampling that is simply the most minuscule of sample sizes, probably, in that even the jury that was pulled together to hear this case was not reflective of the dynamics of the community itself. It was imbalanced, and it would be speculation, but the political climate, particularly as it is kind of established in that part of the state and part of the country, could harbor biases.
Well, clearly, I mean, I don't think that, at some point we have to take the guesswork, if you will, out of play. There's been too many things, if it smells like whatever, tastes like whatever, it probably is whatever,
Right.
And that's what this is, right? Where there's too many things that line up to say there's clearly an injustice that has been caused. I would venture to say that the lack of release of the video is a part of that as well. Meaning, we saw George Floyd, we saw Ahmaud Arbery, we saw Rayshard Brooks. We've seen a lot of them, and that causes a different level of activism, if you will, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's being muted purposefully in this case, because
that very well could be, because there is, I believe, as we marched, and I pondered the same thing, that there is a correlation between the amount of media coverage and the spread of the facts and the amount of response you receive. George Floyd's case, there were, so many individuals who had to witness that, and all of the video evidence that was presented for that it went global. There were people in London, there were people in India, there were people all over the globe with George Floyd signs in support of seeing justice. And even then, they had to charge that officer with a lesser degree crime. So that's how difficult it can be in order to get these things seen through to the fullest extent. But yes, therein lies a serious problem, because we entrust the people in order to make the right decision. They harbor biases. If they harbor biases, can be reflected through their decisions, which are impactful upon the lives of other people. And in these cases, it's upon people of a community who they have no real association with. Yet there is no course of action to be taken to hold those people accountable. And that is founded on some of the principles that were built into this country, and that people are free to think and feel how they want. But if, and this is the circular nature of this, but if those people harbor biases against another and then are then put in charge and given the authority to make decisions over other communities and with regards to these types of these types of decisions, then it is always going to fall one way. And we've seen that time and time again.
Time and again. Time and again. And you know, I said this recently, especially as I looked at this, it just burned me inside for a variety of reasons, one of which is that what we just talked about. This happened, it's as wrong as you can get, but nobody knows about it, right? Even like I just was talking to my god brother today, and he was like, man, I saw you were, doing this march, blah, 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 what happened? So I told him the full story, and he was like, why have I not heard about this? And so I said it happened in a part of the country where, and we talked about earlier, where nobody can hear you scream, right? Because there was nobody on the street with a camera that could catch it, so we're depending upon the person who committed the murder. We're depending upon his version of it, as well as whatever video that we have from his part of the scene, which they're not releasing for, again, whatever reasons. So I think that what was done to bring this back around, what was done in terms of this walk was super significant in bringing light to, not just your dad, Julian Lewis, but all those other folks that wound up joining us that have lost, loved ones in these same kind of manner in here in Georgia. I think that was huge. And what I wanted to ask you was, what brought you to that? What brought you to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this 63-mile walk. What was what got you there? Because I'm going to get to one more thing after you answer that question.
Sure.
What got you to that?
Honestly, there was a little bit of there was initially just a need after that came back, because there was no other evidence to be presented. There's nothing left. The representment is there, as we stated, so it can be represented, but it wouldn't be represented with any additional facts. All the facts were laid out. We'd be approaching the same community, and potentially different, it should be different jurors, but pulling from the same community and likely facing the same results. That makes you feel a bit powerless. And there was a need to say something, to do something. And I reached out to Miley Davis and to Francis Johnson as they kind of explained what had occurred, to let them know my feelings, because as an individual, what can you do exactly? What options are available to you in order to make an impact? And that's really what I wanted to do, is just to be able to do something, anything, in order to bring about more awareness. I don't have a media presence. I don't have a social media presence. I don't have Facebook. I don't have, Twitter and all these things. And so for some, that is where it all lies, especially if you have some form of celebrity, or if you've built that form of celebrity. You use that influencer, kind of following in order to spread a message. That's not something that I had. And it's not something that I really thought about up until then. You hear about it, but again, it came from celebrities and such. And so that really didn't seem like an option to start a social media campaign and move forward with something like that to try and gain traction through there, even though it is a powerful medium and platform in order to get information out there. I felt like it deserved something more than that, something that, wouldn't just get scrolled past, to get to, a cat video or to get to, some type of sports clip or who knows what else is out there competing for those same eyeballs. And so with what is truly, an issue of old, our community has faced this danger and this threat for as long as people can remember. We used a method of old in marching and putting ourselves out there to bring about awareness so that people would see us in that community moving towards something to try and rectify the situation. And so that's where we landed, was with the march. And so I started, to think about it. It didn't take long to think about. The only thing I had to think about was if there was anything else that could be done. But that was something that could be done immediately or relatively quickly, and should get attention much faster, I think, than other methods. And so we, with the support of Black Man Labs and Black Voters Matter, along with others, Just Georgia, Justice for Georgia, there's so many organizations that came out in support to formulate this march and get the logistics together and kind of convene as a family to move forward and bring this awareness about so that this wouldn't be swept away, because it's too important. Not the death of my father is something that will reside within the community and the family and all of those they felt the loss. But the fact that something like this could be lost as an opportunity to set the precedent where people and officers in particular are held accountably to the fullest degree for their actions is important. And if we lose this opportunity, or if we had lost this opportunity by not speaking up, that would be equally as tragic as my father's death.
Yeah, and to your point, we know that one thing's for sure: if we said nothing, nothing would change. There's a strong possibility that things might not change that much anyway. But for sure, if we don't at least put our toe in the water of justice, then we definitely aren't going to make any ripples, right?
But it puts it on the record as well.
Yeah.
We know that there's been injustice served in the past. We know that there have been murders that have been committed where officers were not held accountable. We know there are murders that no one has heard of, that no one will ever know of, that have occurred, that won't see the light of day. And those are that is the fate for which I think this was slated to just pass, so that no one would be aware of the degree at which this officer was charged. And so if at least it is marked, then we know the degree of injustice, and we can look back on this and say, well, this has happened before, and this is what happened. And and we can use that in order to hopefully chip away and build simultaneously towards a more just future.
And I think that how we really ended the march of taking over the streets of Savannah all the way to the Southern District office, as well as being able to kind of forcing their hand on meeting with you, Mauli, and Francis. I think that speaks to what we have to do as a community, right? Where everybody has to at least put a little bit of pressure somewhere. And if everybody is doing that synchronous movement, then I think we will see some changes. I mean, the fact that you all were able to force that meeting speaks to something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, release the video, and just at the end of the day, being right isn't hard, right? Doing the right thing really isn't hard.
Right.
If everybody does the right things, then we don't have these kind of conversations. There's no need for marches, right?
Right.
But what happens is people, as you spoke to, get involved with their biases and try to make sense of that. And quite honestly, it's just nonsensical to start with, right?
No.
So I want to say this, man. I know we're pushing up against the clock here, but I just have to tell you, man, I was immensely impressed. Folks, just if y'all listening in, 63 miles was walked over a 4-day period, right? 5-day period, right? 5 days, 63 miles from basically Statesboro to Savannah, Georgia. And this man was moving like nobody's business and was able to wound up really leading the pack and getting us through this walk. And when I say us, I mean all those other people, because I was part of the car crew, and every now and then I jumped out to walk with you all. But I knew that I was going to be able to keep pace with you, brother, because you were humping, and I have to ask you, did you feel the spirit of your ancestors on that walk? Because that's what as I watched you, that's what I felt. I felt like there was something going on within you internally that was changing where your mind was. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, certainly. I woke up that first morning and I didn't know how I would feel initially waking up that morning. But I woke up with an immense amount of energy. And then arriving, to meet everyone face to face for that first time, I felt the support there, from all of those who had come out to support. And then the sense of responsibility was there for all the people in the community. And then as we began to walk, and we passed by, multiple fields and such, where you knew there were ancestors who worked those fields, ancestor who died, from those trees and such. And that, along with my father, gave me more energy. And I thought about that continuously as we took steps towards the U.S. Attorney's Office, because the state had failed us. Leaving it up to that community had failed us. And so we were trying to take it to the next level, a level that hadn't really received this problem directly in this fashion before. And so this was an opportunity to speak up for all of those that we had lost. And that I carried with me, particularly through the rain. Whenever we faced quite a few downpours. And initially I thought it would be more, sunny skies, and we'd be, kind of hammered with heat. But we got a significant amount of heat for sure. But there were these downpours that would stop many from being outside at all. But we had a mission to accomplish. We had a voice that needed amplification, lost lives that needed someone to breathe their breath for them and speak on their behalf. And that is something that charged me, for sure.
Yeah, and for me, it was clear. The progression over that 5-day period of watching you from my standpoint. The first day I could tell you were just kind of like, okay, here we go. I got it. I got the energy. We were clapping up, getting ready right at the beginning. And then after that first day, I looked at you and I was like, okay, he's in there. He's in the zone. And I was like, that it was more than inspiring enough for me to stay. I was only supposed to be there 2 days. And
yes,
I had to stay.
It was,
oh, yeah.
I appreciate the support and the love.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to have you stay.
I was super excited to be there and be able to stay on. I just had to find clothes. That's it. So fortunately, we had enough T-shirts, every day. That box of T-shirts got wore out, boy, I swear.
It did. Bottom.
Yeah, but man, what's next? What do you think is next for you?
I think this is going to be an opportunity to kind of reflect and take a moment to figure out if there are other avenues, other channels through which I can lend my support to others, because we know that this isn't something that's going to change overnight. Mm-hmm. The list of names is going to continue to grow. To be there for others would be one means of support, and then to start to think dynamically, because the challenges that we have now in front of us are require some patience, and they need to be very intentional and meaningful when taken. And so that is something that I am looking to develop now. There are opportunities within my community here locally, because to make a change in any fashion, it can be done on different levels. You can try and help people to find ways to make more equitable economic conditions, more equitable educational opportunities, equitable treatment by the medical community. So there are lots of spaces to apply myself. So I'm pondering those now. There are some places where I can begin to volunteer and start to look into, but I need a little bit more time in order to figure out how to apply myself directly to this cause, because it is so nuanced and it is so complicated. And it is like we stated, with this circular nature of the community who we entrust to make the right decision, and yet also entrust them to do it unbiasedly. It doesn't occur. So how do you attack a problem like that? Because as we also stated earlier, you cannot, that's not an incriminating offense. To have these feelings or to have these, viewpoints, it's rather one of the defining factors of this country. So how do you navigate in these spaces? But the underpinning point is to try and move people's perspective. And that is truly challenging, to find a way to reach a community who seemingly does not have that compassion for the lives lost, and get them to understand the loss that we're feeling, and that seems to be escalating. So it's going to take a little bit of time to try and figure that out and pinpoint exactly what action I'll take, but that's where I'm headed.
Hey, you put this on your heart. The Brook Bacon Walks for Justice, 501c3. You might want to think about that, because what you did what you did is transferable to a lot of communities, man. And being able to have a walk for justice is powerful, and that's something you might want to think about, because you did it well, brother, and you were strong and inspiring, and I'm sure there's other people out there that need to be activated like you were, because I saw that activation happen with you over that 5-day period of time.
And that's something that, it leads back to the point I was making, in that this activation is something that, we have seen in different communities. We've seen it, like I said, when we saw George Floyd, throughout the world. These are people who were not connected to this man, but felt that pain and saw that injustice and decided to act. So it's there. It's in everyone. It's not something that should have to be invoked and people kind of inaugurated into through tragedy this close and this personally. And in order to kind of stunt these occurrences, that needs to be voiced more. And it doesn't take a 63-mile march to start. You can start smaller. You can start with something that's simple, and it's been said so many times, with a conversation and trying to just gain perspective.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is powerful, and that's where I think that's how you begin to change minds. It can be done instantaneously if you're shocked into it through the viewing of these videos and reports that we have seen, time and time again. But just talking to someone, and you don't have to talk to someone who is directly affected. Just talk to people who are in your community, who are around you, because we all feel that same pain.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. We went over time.
Oh, we did.
That's okay. I wanted to, because this was so important, and having been a part of a very small part of your process this past weekend, past 5 days.
Everyone gave their entire heart, including you, and I appreciate it to the utmost.
Well, I just wanted to be able to give as much of a voice to you as possible here today, and then also to say, the Black Man Lab is going to be continuously supporting whatever you want to do going in the future. And likewise, anybody that I've had on here before, I always say, if you are in Atlanta, you have to make it your business to come to the Black Man Lab to share, whether it's to share your story or just share of yourself with our other men in the room. We wrap up with two things. First, your habits, rituals, and disciplines, the things that you do on a daily basis that keep you moving forward. So if you could share.
I am, I like to cook. It's therapeutic.
Sure.
I like, being in there and being able to get the family involved. So it's family oriented, and being able to create and be creative, and, the ingredients and everything like that, and the smells, and then, the actual consumption of food, they're all satisfying things, and they're family building as well for me. So that's a very comforting space for me, and that's on a daily basis. You got to eat. So I've made it, part of, and it's something I think I got from my mom. She's a very good cook. So I picked up a lot of those recipes, and I started doing it on my own, and that's something on a regular basis that I commit to kind of keep some stability. Yeah.
Good stuff. Hey, again, more connections between you and I. I'm a chef by nature. I went to culinary school right after college and cooked for a while. Now I don't, because I still cook at home, but not professionally. I'm always in my family. I'm always the one who's commissioned to cook Thanksgiving and those kind of meals. But it's really, for me, as you said, I completely understand that. When I'm under a high level of stress, I do two things. One, spend a lot of time in the grocery store, and then two, be creative in the kitchen, because for whatever reason that takes me to a different place, and I can get centered that way. So I completely get that, man. Completely get that.
100%.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. So you know how we wrapped up every meeting, every time we finished the walk. And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing virtually, man. You can just put your arms up and lock them together, and then just repeat after me, my man. I have a link in this chain.
I have a link in this chain.
And it won't break here.
And it won't break here.
I'm a link in this chain.
I have a link in this chain.
And it won't break here.
And it won't break here.
We are links in this chain.
We are links in this chain.
And we won't break here.
And we won't break here.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Love you. Keep pushing. And know that the Black Man Lab is here for you if you need us. And again, if you're ever in Atlanta, you got to come see us.
Will do. Right. Most definitely. I appreciate it. And I will look forward to coming down there and seeing you guys. The last thing, I know I should have probably mentioned this earlier. Okay. There was a website. It's justiceforjulianlewis.com. And on there, you can find more information if you want to read up and get more specific details, or if you miss any part of the program. And there's also a petition there that can be signed in order to garner some support to get that video evidence and such released so that the public at large can see it. So if you do have the opportunity, if you would be so kind as to visit it, read for yourself, and if you're inclined, please sign the petition.
Absolutely. Again, that's justiceforjulianlewis.com. And you're right. We should have mentioned that early on in our conversation. But I'll make sure it's also on the website as well, too.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you and all of your viewers.
All right, brother. Appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Anytime.
Let me know if you need any recipes. I got a lot.
I'll hit you up.
Come on. All right, brother. Take care now.
Every time we speak, I feel this melody telling me my black dreams are sacred. My black